Amira Cole had learned long ago that some rooms were built to make certain people feel small. And tonight, as she stepped into the glittering ballroom of the Grand Ashford Hotel, wearing a server's white uniform, she could feel every judgmental eye upon her. The chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting golden light on women draped in diamonds and men whose watches cost more than a yearly rent. But what began as a routine evening would soon explode into a public act of cruelty so violent it would be captured on camera and seen by millions. What none of them knew as Vivian Locke prepared to humiliate her was that the quiet woman they were trying to break had already survived far worse than their hatred. And by the time the truth finally emerged, no one in that room would ever look at power, privilege, or redemption the same way again. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The crystal chandeliers cast dancing reflections across the polished marble floors of the Grand Ashford Hotel. Soft classical music drifted through the massive ballroom as servers in crisp white uniforms moved like ghosts between tables draped in ivory linen. Champagne flutes clinked in harmony with gentle laughter, and the air smelled of expensive perfume mixed with fresh roses arranged in towering centerpieces. This was the kind of place where money whispered instead of shouted, where every detail had been carefully orchestrated to remind guests of their elevated status. Amira Cole stood near the entrance to the kitchen, smoothing down her white serving uniform one last time before stepping into the ballroom. At 28, she had worked enough of these high society events to know the unspoken rules. Be invisible, be efficient, never make eye contact unless spoken to first. She exhaled slowly, centering herself the way her grandmother had taught her years ago. Tonight was different from her usual routine. She was filling in for her friend Maria, who had called that morning with a terrible flu. Maria had begged her to take the shift, promising it would be an easy gig at a charity gala. What Maria hadn't mentioned was who had organized the event. Amira moved through the ballroom with practiced grace, setting the final place cards on each table. Her fingers worked quickly, making sure every detail was perfect. She had learned long ago that excellence left no room for criticism. As she adjusted a slightly crooked fork, she took in the crowd gathering around the bar. Women in designer gowns laughed too loudly at jokes that probably weren't funny. Men in custom suits checked their phones while pretending to listen to conversations. This world felt like a performance, and everyone knew their role. Everyone except her. She was part of the backdrop, not the show. The ballroom doors opened wider, and more guests flooded in. Amira recognized a few faces from magazine covers and news segments. Otide entrepreneur, a real estate mogul, a television personality who smiled constantly, even when no cameras were pointed at her. They all shared the same polished confidence, the kind that came from never having to worry about making rent or choosing between groceries and gas. Amira caught her reflection in one of the gilded mirrors lining the walls. Her dark skin glowed under the warm lighting, and her hair was pulled back into a neat bun. She looked professional, composed. But beneath that calm exterior, something felt off tonight. Maybe it was the way some guests looked right through her, as if she were furniture. Or maybe it was the slight tension in her shoulders, a familiar weight she carried into rooms like this. A sharp voice cut through the ambient noise. "Excuse me, you there?" Amira turned to see a woman approaching her table. The woman was probably in her mid-40s, tall and slender, wearing a floor-length ivory gown that probably cost more than Amira made in 6 months. Her blonde hair was styled in perfect waves, and a string of pearls sat elegantly against her collarbone. Everything about her screamed wealth and status, from her diamond bracelet to the way she held her chin slightly elevated, as if the air near the ceiling was somehow superior. This was Vivian Locke, though Amira didn't know her name yet. Vivian gestured impatiently toward the table Amira had just finished arranging. "This tablecloth has a wrinkle. Fix it." She didn't say please. She didn't make eye contact. She simply pointed and turned away, already scanning the room for someone more important to acknowledge. Amira felt the familiar sting of dismissal, but kept her expression neutral. She moved to the table and smoothed the barely visible crease in the fabric. It had been perfectly fine before, but that wasn't the point. The point was that Vivian needed to establish hierarchy, to remind Amira where she stood in the social order. As Amira worked, Vivian spoke loudly to a woman beside her, clearly intending for everyone nearby to hear. Service standards have really gone down at these venues. I specifically requested experienced staff, but I suppose beggars can't be choosers. The other woman laughed awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable. A few servers exchanged glances, but no one said anything. Amira finished smoothing the tablecloth and stepped back, her jaw tight. She had heard worse over the years. Words like that used to cut deep, but she had learned to let them slide off. Mostly. Still, something about Vivian's tone carried an extra edge tonight. It wasn't just dismissiveness. It was contempt. Amira returned to her station near the kitchen entrance, trying to shake off the interaction. She reminded herself why she did this work. The hotel job was part-time, just enough to help fund her real passion. For the past 3 years, she had been running a small nonprofit called Foundations First, a program that provided mentoring, tutoring, and resources to kids from underprivileged neighborhoods. Most of her days were spent in a modest office across town, working with teenagers who needed someone to believe in them. The gala money helped keep the lights on when donations ran thin. She wasn't just a waitress, though people like Vivian would never bother to ask. The ballroom doors opened again, and this time, a different energy entered the room. Amira noticed it immediately. Conversations paused. Heads turned. A tall man in a tailored black suit walked in, his presence commanding attention without effort. He had dark hair touched with gray at the temples and a strong jawline that suggested both discipline and weariness. His eyes, a deep shade of brown, scanned the room with a quiet intensity. Ethan Locke, Vivian's husband. Amira didn't know who he was yet, but she could tell he was important. The way people straightened their posture when he passed. The way the event coordinator rushed over to greet him personally. He nodded politely at the attention, but didn't seem to relish it the way others might. There was something reserved about him, almost reluctant. As he moved through the crowd, Amira found herself holding a tray of champagne flutes near the main aisle. Ethan walked past, and just as he did, the coordinator bumped into Amira from behind, causing the tray to wobble dangerously. Amira steadied it quickly, muscles tensing to keep the glasses from toppling. Ethan noticed. He paused, placing a hand gently on the edge of the tray to help stabilize it. "Careful," he said quietly, his voice calm and warm. His eyes met hers for just a moment, and she saw something unexpected there. Kindness. Not pity, not condescension. Just simple human decency. "Thank you," Amira said softly. He nodded and continued toward his table. The entire interaction lasted maybe 5 seconds, but it left Amira slightly off balance. In a room full of people who looked through her, he had looked at her. Really looked. She didn't have time to dwell on it. The event was starting, and she had work to do. The gala proceeded with the usual pomp. The host, a silver-haired man with a booming voice, welcomed everyone and thanked them for their generous support of the evening's cause, a foundation for arts education in public schools. Amira found the irony bitter. Half the people in this room probably sent their kids to private schools where arts programs were never in danger of being cut. As the first course was served, Amira moved between tables with quiet efficiency. She had learned to read a room, to anticipate needs before they were spoken. A guest needed water. Another wanted their salad dressing on the side. She handled it all with grace, blending into the background while keeping everything running smoothly. At one point, a distinguished older woman in a sapphire gown stopped her. "Excuse me, are you the event coordinator?" Amira blinked, surprised. "No, ma'am. I'm part of the serving staff." The woman looked genuinely impressed. "Well, you certainly carry yourself like management. You've been handling everything beautifully tonight. So calm and efficient." "Thank you," Amira said, feeling a small glow of pride. Compliments were rare in this line of work, but the warmth was short-lived. Vivian, seated at a nearby table, had overheard the exchange. She let out a sharp laugh that carried across the space. "She's staff, darling, not management. Let's not get confused about who does what around here." The older woman's face flushed with embarrassment, and she quickly turned away. Amira felt the sting of the comment, but kept moving. She wouldn't give Vivian the satisfaction of a reaction. Throughout the evening, Amira noticed Ethan watching his wife with an expression she couldn't quite read. It wasn't adoration. It wasn't even contentment. It looked more like quiet resignation, the face of someone who had learned to tolerate rather than embrace. Later, when Amira was restocking glasses near the service area, Ethan appeared beside her. He had loosened his tie slightly, and there was a tiredness around his eyes that made him seem more human, less like the polished businessman she had seen earlier. Earlier tonight, someone knocked over a glass of water near the podium, he said. You cleaned it up before anyone even noticed. That kind of attention to detail is rare. Amira looked up, surprised he had noticed something so small. Just part of the job. Maybe, he said, but not everyone does their job that well. For a moment, they just stood there, an unlikely pair in the corner of a glittering ballroom. Then Ethan smiled, a genuine expression that softened his entire face, and Amira found herself smiling back. It was brief, fleeting, but it was real. Across the room, Vivian's eyes narrowed. She had been watching, and what she saw made something cold settle in her chest. Her husband, smiling at the help. At that girl, the one she had already put in her place twice tonight. Jealousy was an ugly emotion, but Vivian had never been one to examine her feelings too closely. She only knew that Ethan's attention, however small, had been directed at someone else. Someone beneath them. Someone who didn't belong in their world. And that was unacceptable. The orchestra began playing a soft melody, signaling the transition to the main course. Amira checked her station list and saw that she was assigned to deliver wine to several tables, including the one where Vivian and Ethan sat with other prominent guests. She filled her tray carefully, balancing 6 glasses of red wine with practiced precision. The bottles were expensive, the kind with labels in French that Amira couldn't pronounce, but knew cost more than her weekly paycheck. She lifted the tray and started across the ballroom, her steps measured and confident. Vivian watched her approach. Something dark flickered across her face. As Amira reached the table and began setting down the first glass, Vivian shifted in her seat. It seemed casual, just a woman adjusting her position. But the movement was deliberate. She pushed her chair backward just as Amira leaned forward, and the corner of the chair caught Amira's hip. The tray tilted. Amira tried to compensate, her muscles straining to keep everything balanced, but physics won. One glass tipped, then another. Red wine splashed across the white tablecloth and, more dramatically, across the front of Vivian's ivory gown. Time seemed to slow down. The ballroom, which had been filled with conversation and music, went eerily quiet. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Even the orchestra seemed to fade into stunned silence. Vivian stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Her mouth opened in an exaggerated gasp of horror, and her hand flew to her chest as if she had been physically assaulted. "You ruined my gown," she shrieked, her voice piercing through the silence like a knife. Amira stood frozen, the empty tray still in her hands. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. She had seen what happened. She knew Vivian had moved on purpose. But as she looked around the ballroom, at the dozens of faces now staring at her with varying degrees of shock and judgment, she realized the truth didn't matter. All they would see was a clumsy server who had ruined a wealthy woman's expensive dress. Ethan sat motionless, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. His eyes moved from the wine stain to his wife's theatrical expression, and then to Amira's face. What he saw there, that combination of humiliation and quiet dignity, made something inside him twist painfully. This was wrong. He knew it was wrong, but he said nothing. Vivian's voice rose even higher, filling every corner of the vast ballroom. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Look at this. Look at what you've done to my dress." Every eye in the room was now fixed on the scene unfolding at the center table. Some guests leaned forward in their seats, openly staring. Others whispered behind their hands, relishing the drama. A few looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. Amira swallowed hard. forcing herself to stay calm. She had been in difficult situations before, had faced prejudice and hostility in various forms throughout her life. But something about this moment, about the public nature of it, made her feel more exposed than she ever had. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "It was an accident. I'll pay for the cleaning, or the replacement if necessary." Vivian laughed, but there was no humor in it. The sound was sharp and cruel. "Pay for it? Do you even know what this costs? This is a Valentino original. You probably don't even make in a year what I paid for this dress." The words were designed to humiliate, and they worked. Amira felt her face grow hot, felt the weight of every stare pressing down on her. She opened her mouth to respond, but Vivian wasn't finished. "This is exactly what I was talking about earlier," Vivian announced to the room at large, playing to her audience now. "The standards at these events have completely deteriorated. I specifically requested professional staff, and instead we get this." The way she said this made it clear she wasn't just talking about the spilled wine. She was talking about Amira herself. The maitre d', a thin man with gray hair and nervous eyes, rushed over. His face was pale with worry. "Mrs. Locke, please, I'm sure we can resolve this quietly. If we could just step outside for a moment." "Quietly." Vivian's voice dripped with disdain. "Why should I be quiet? Why should I be the one who has to leave when she's the one who destroyed my property?" She turned back to Amira, her blue eyes cold and hard. "You're going to apologize. Properly. In front of everyone here." Amira had already apologized, but she understood what Vivian really wanted. She wanted submission. She wanted Amira to grovel, to prostrate herself before this audience of wealth and privilege. She wanted everyone to see the natural order restored, with Amira firmly in her place. For a moment, Amira considered refusing, considered walking away with whatever dignity she had left. But she thought about Maria, her friend who had trusted her to take this shift. She thought about the paycheck she needed for next month's rent on her office space. She thought about the 15 kids who counted on her program. So she took a breath and said, more clearly this time, "I apologize, Mrs. Locke. The accident was my fault, and I take full responsibility. I'll do whatever I can to make this right. It should have been enough." Any reasonable person would have accepted the apology and moved on. But Vivian wasn't reasonable. Not tonight. Not when she had spent the entire evening watching her husband's attention drift, watching him smile at people who weren't her, watching the cracks in their marriage widen into chasms she refused to acknowledge. And certainly not when that attention had been directed, even briefly, at this woman standing before her now. Something snapped inside Vivian. Years of insecurity, of comparing herself to younger women, of feeling her beauty and influence fade with each passing year. It all coalesced into a single moment of pure, irrational rage. She reached out and grabbed the collar of Amira's white uniform. "An apology isn't enough," Vivian hissed. "You need to understand what you've done." And then she pulled. The fabric of Amira's uniform was silk, expensive enough to look professional, but not designed to withstand force. It tore with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the silent ballroom. The ripping noise echoed off the high ceilings, and Amira felt the cool air hit her shoulder as the material gave way. Gasps erupted throughout the room. This had crossed a line that even the most oblivious guest couldn't ignore. This wasn't about a dress anymore. This was violence. This was assault. Amira stood completely still. The torn fabric hung loose around her shoulder, exposing her collarbone and the strap of her undershirt. She didn't try to cover herself. She didn't cry, though her eyes burned with the effort of holding back tears. She simply stood there, looking at Vivian with an expression of such profound sadness that it seemed to unnerve everyone watching, including Vivian herself. For just a second, Vivian's face flickered with something that might have been shame, but it passed quickly, replaced by defiant justification. She released Amira's uniform and stepped back, brushing her hands together as if removing dirt. "Maybe now you'll be more careful," Vivian said, but her voice lacked the conviction it had held moments before. Ethan was halfway out of his chair, his face dark with anger. His hands were clenched into fists, and for a moment it looked like he might physically intervene. But before he could speak, before he could do anything, the event host appeared at the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," the man's voice boomed through the speakers, forcefully cheerful. "Let's direct our attention to the main stage. Our charity auction is about to begin, and we have some incredible items to bid on tonight." It was a transparent attempt to redirect attention, to sweep the ugly scene under the rug and return to the evening's purpose. And it worked. The crowd's attention shifted, grateful for an excuse to look away from the uncomfortable confrontation. Ethan remained standing, torn between creating an even bigger scene and maintaining the facade of normalcy. His eyes found Amira's, and in them she saw genuine remorse. But remorse didn't change what had happened. It didn't repair her torn uniform or restore her dignity. Amira turned and walked toward the kitchen, her spine straight and her head held high. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Not here. Not now. The kitchen doors swung closed behind her, muffling the sounds of the ballroom. The moment she was out of sight, her legs nearly gave out. She braced herself against a stainless steel counter, her breath coming in short gasps. "Amira!" Maria appeared from the back prep area, her face stricken. "Oh my God, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. I should never have asked you to cover for me." Maria wrapped her arms around Amira, and that simple gesture of comfort nearly shattered what was left of Amira's composure. But she held on, forcing the tears back. "It's not your fault," Amira managed to say. "You couldn't have known. That woman is a monster," Maria said fiercely. "You should sue her. You should press charges. She assaulted you in front of hundreds of people." Amira shook her head. "And who would believe me? She's Vivian Locke. I looked her up when I saw the event listing. Her husband owns half the commercial real estate in this city. They're connected to everyone who matters. I am nobody." "You're not nobody," Maria insisted. "You're worth 10 of her." But worth didn't matter in situations like this. Power mattered. Money mattered. And Amira had neither. She looked down at her torn uniform, at the way the fabric hung limply from her shoulder. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. Vivian hadn't just torn cloth. She had tried to tear away Amira's dignity, to strip her of the composure that had been her armor against a world that often judged her before she even spoke. "I need to go," Amira said quietly. "I can't go back out there." Maria squeezed her hand. "Take the service exit. I'll clock you out and handle the rest of your tables." "But you're sick." "I'll manage. Go home, Amira. Please." Amira nodded and moved toward the exit, pausing only to grab her jacket and purse from the staff locker room. As she walked through the dimly lit service corridor, she passed a large trash bin. Inside, crumpled on top of food waste and discarded napkins, she saw a piece of white fabric. Her torn uniform sleeve. Someone had already thrown it away. The metaphor was almost too obvious to bear. She pushed through the exit door into the cool night air. The hotel's back alley was far less glamorous than its front entrance. Dumpsters lined one wall, and a single flickering streetlight provided barely enough illumination to see. Amira leaned against the brick wall, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of what had happened. Inside the ballroom, the auction continued. Ethan sat rigid in his chair, mechanically raising his paddle when appropriate, but not really seeing the items being sold. His mind was elsewhere, replaying the scene over and over. The way Vivian had grabbed Amira's uniform, the sound of the fabric tearing, the looks on the faces of their guests, some shocked, some secretly pleased by the drama. And Amira's face, that expression of calm dignity, even as she was being publicly humiliated and physically assaulted. He had done nothing, said nothing, just sat there like a coward while his wife committed an act of cruelty that he knew, deep in his bones, was wrong. When had he become this person? When had his silence become complicity? Beside him, Vivian was laughing at something a friend had said, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just torn another human being's clothes in a fit of rage. She caught him looking at her and smiled, reaching over to squeeze his hand. He pulled away. The gesture was small, but Vivian noticed. Her smile faltered, and something hard entered her eyes. Hours later, after the auction ended and the guests began filtering out, after false smiles and hollow congratulations on a successful event, Ethan and Vivian rode home in silence. Their driver navigated the empty streets while they sat in the back of the sedan, separated by more than just physical space. "You're angry with me," Vivian finally said. It wasn't a question. Ethan looked out the window at the passing city lights. "What you did tonight was unacceptable. She spilled wine on my dress. You moved your chair into her path on purpose. I saw you." Vivian's jaw tightened. "Don't be ridiculous." "And then you tore her clothes." Ethan turned to face his wife. "You physically assaulted an employee in front of everyone we know. Do you understand how wrong that was?" "She needed to learn her place," Vivian said coldly. "These people need to understand there are consequences for incompetence." "Her place." Ethan's voice rose slightly. "Listen to yourself, Vivian. You sound like—" He stopped himself, but the unspoken word hung in the air between them. "Racist." "Don't you dare," Vivian said, her voice low and dangerous. "Don't you dare make this about race. This was about professionalism, about standards. It was about cruelty," Ethan said quietly. "And I'm ashamed that I sat there and let it happen." They didn't speak for the rest of the ride home. When they arrived at their mansion, a sprawling modern estate in the city's most exclusive neighborhood, Vivian went straight to her room. Ethan poured himself a drink in his study and sat in the dark, thinking about the night's events. He couldn't stop seeing Amira's face. The way she had stood there, not fighting back, not causing a scene, just accepting the humiliation with a grace that shamed everyone watching, including him, especially him. Around 3 a.m, unable to sleep, Ethan went back to his car. He told himself he just wanted to retrieve some papers he had left in the back seat. But what he was really looking for was something else. In the trash bag from the event, among discarded programs and used cocktail napkins, he found it. A piece of torn white fabric, stained with red wine. He held it in his hands, the silk soft despite its mistreatment. This wasn't just fabric. It represented something larger. A young woman's dignity, torn apart for no reason other than insecurity and prejudice. Ethan made a decision then, standing in his garage at 3 a.m, holding a stranger's torn uniform. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do yet, but he knew he couldn't let this go. Couldn't pretend it hadn't happened or didn't matter. The next morning, while Vivian slept in, Ethan sat in his home office and called his personal assistant. "Rachel," he said when she answered, "I need you to find some information for me." Discreetly. "Of course, Mr. Locke. What do you need?" "Last night's gala at the Grand Ashford. There was a server, a young woman, late 20s, African-American. I need to know her name and any other information you can find. Employment history, background, anything relevant." Rachel paused, professional enough not to ask why, but curious enough to wonder. "I'll have that information to you by this afternoon." "Thank you," Ethan said, and ended the call. He sat back in his chair, uncertain of what he would do with the information once he had it. All he knew was that the woman from the gala deserved better than what she had received. And if no one else was going to acknowledge that, then he would. It was the very least he could do. 3 days after the gala, Ethan sat in his corner office on the 42nd floor, watching the city sprawl beneath him. The morning sun reflected off glass towers, creating a landscape of gleaming steel and ambition. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, untouched. He couldn't stop thinking about that night, about the look in Amira's eyes as she walked away with her uniform torn. His assistant Rachel knocked softly and entered with a manila folder. Her expression was carefully neutral, the way it always was when she knew she was delivering information that might be personally significant rather than just professional. "The background information you requested, Mr. Locke." Ethan took the folder, and Rachel left without another word. He opened it slowly, not sure what he expected to find. Employment records from the Grand Ashford, perhaps. Maybe a resume with previous catering jobs. What he found instead stopped him cold. Amira Cole, bachelor's degree in engineering from State University, graduated summa cum laude on a full academic scholarship. Former intern at Henderson Aerospace. Current founder and executive director of Foundations First, a nonprofit organization providing educational support and mentoring to underprivileged youth in the city's most challenging neighborhoods. Ethan flipped through the pages, finding articles from local newspapers about her work. A profile piece from 2 years ago showed her standing with a group of teenagers in front of a renovated community center, all of them grinning at the camera. The headline read, "Local engineer trades corporate career for community impact." There were tax documents showing her nonprofit's modest budget, mostly funded by small donations and grants. And there, at the bottom of her employment history, was the part-time position at the Grand Ashford Hotel. 20 hours a week, just enough to supplement the nonprofit work that clearly consumed most of her time. She wasn't just a waitress. She was an engineer who had chosen purpose over profit, who worked a service job to fund her real calling. And Vivian had treated her like she was worthless. Ethan felt something shift inside him, a combination of admiration and shame so powerful it made his chest ache. He picked up his phone and dialed Rachel again. "I need an address for the Foundation's first office." "And Rachel? Clear my schedule for this afternoon." 2 hours later, Ethan stood outside a small storefront in a neighborhood his GPS had marked as economically disadvantaged. The building was old but well-maintained, with fresh paint on the trim and clean windows. Through the glass, he could see teenagers sitting at tables, books open in front of them. A young man was writing on a whiteboard while two girls watched intently. And there was Amira, moving between tables, leaning over to point at something in a textbook, her face animated and engaged in a way he hadn't seen at the gala. He felt like an intruder, watching her in her element. This was her world, and he didn't belong here any more than she had belonged in that ballroom, serving champagne to people who refused to see her. Ethan pushed open the door. A small bell chimed, and several heads turned toward him. Amira looked up from the table, where she'd been helping a teenage girl with what looked like algebra homework. Recognition flashed across her face, followed immediately by wariness. She said something to the girl, then walked over to where Ethan stood awkwardly by the door. She was wearing jeans and a simple blue sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. Without the formal uniform, she looked younger, more relaxed, at least until she got close enough for him to see the guardedness in her eyes. "Mr. Locke," she said quietly, glancing back at her students. "This is unexpected. I apologize for showing up unannounced," Ethan said. "I wanted to speak with you. Do you have a few minutes?" Amira hesitated, then nodded toward a small office in the back. "Let's talk in there." The office was barely large enough for a desk, 2 chairs, and a filing cabinet. The walls were covered with drawings and thank you cards from students, bright splashes of color in the cramped space. Amira closed the door and turned to face him, arms crossed. "How did you find me?" "I asked my assistant to look into your background," Ethan admitted. "I know how that sounds, but after what happened at the gala, I needed to know who you were." "And what did you discover?" Her voice was cool, controlled. "That I'm an idiot," Ethan said simply. "And a coward." That seemed to surprise her. Her arms lowered slightly. "What happened that night was wrong," Ethan continued. "What my wife did to you was cruel and unjustifiable. And I sat there and did nothing. I let it happen. I am sorry, Amira. I am deeply, profoundly sorry." Amira studied him for a long moment. "You're apologizing for not standing up for me." "Yes." "Do you know how many people were in that ballroom? Maybe 200? And not one person spoke up. Not one person said what she did was wrong. You weren't the only one who stayed silent, Mr. Locke." "That doesn't make it right," Ethan said. "And please call me Ethan. Why are you really here?" Amira asked. "Guilt? Pity? Because if it's pity, you can leave right now." "It's not pity," Ethan said firmly. "It's respect. I read about your work here, about what you've built. You have an engineering degree from one of the best programs in the state. You could be working anywhere, making 6 figures. Instead, you're here, helping kids who probably can't pay you anything. They pay me in ways that matter," Amira said softly. "I know. I can see that." Ethan gestured toward the office walls. "This is incredible, what you're doing. How long have you been running this program?" 3 years. We started with 5 kids in my apartment. Now we have 32 regular students and a waiting list of 40 more. Pride crept in her voice despite her wariness. "We offer tutoring, mentoring, college prep, and just a safe place to be after school. Most of these kids don't have that. And you fund this how? Small grants, individual donations. The hotel job helps cover rent and supplies. Amira paused. Or it did. I'm not sure they'll want me back after what happened. If they fire you over that, they're fools, Ethan said. And if they do, I'll make sure everyone knows why. They talked for another 20 minutes. Ethan asked questions about her program, about the kids she worked with, about her plans for expansion. Amira found herself relaxing despite her initial defensiveness. He listened in a way that felt genuine, asking follow-up questions that showed he was actually paying attention. When one of the students knocked on the door, needing help with a chemistry problem, Ethan stood to leave. "Thank you for your time," he said. "And again, I'm sorry. For all of it." "Apology accepted," Amira said. Then, surprising herself, she added, "Would you like to stay? See what we do here?" Ethan smiled, that same genuine expression she'd glimpsed at the gala. "I like that very much." He stayed for 2 hours, watching Amira work with her students. She was patient and encouraging, breaking down complex problems into manageable pieces. She knew each kid by name, knew their struggles and their strengths. This wasn't just a job or even a passion project. This was her calling. As Ethan finally prepared to leave, Amira walked him to the door. The afternoon sun was slanting through the windows, painting everything in warm gold. "Your wife was wrong about you," Ethan said quietly. "You're not staff. You're not management. You're a leader. These kids are lucky to have you." "Thank you," Amira said, and this time when she smiled, it reached her eyes. Over the next 2 weeks, something unexpected happened. Ethan started coming by the office, usually in the afternoons after his business meetings ended. At first, Amira thought it was guilt driving him, but gradually she realized it was something else. He was genuinely interested in the work, in the kids, in the problems she faced trying to keep everything running on a shoestring budget. They started having coffee together, sitting in the small office while students worked outside. They talked about everything from education policy to their own childhoods. Ethan told her about growing up with wealth, but feeling disconnected from anything meaningful. Amira shared stories about her grandmother, who had raised her after her parents died and had taught her that dignity wasn't something anyone could take from you. "She sounds remarkable," Ethan said one afternoon. She passed away 5 years ago." Amira's voice was soft. "She always said I was meant for something bigger than myself. That's why I started this place. To honor her." Ethan felt something shifting between them, a connection that went beyond the circumstances of their first meeting. He found himself thinking about her at odd moments during the day, wondering what she would think about a business decision or how her students were doing. At home, Vivian noticed his distance. His calls got shorter, his dinners quieter. When she asked about his day, his answers were vague and distracted. "You're different," she said one night over dinner in their cavernous dining room. "Different how?" Ethan asked, not really listening. "Distant, like your mind is somewhere else." It was, but Ethan wasn't ready to examine why. Then, 3 weeks after the gala, everything changed. Someone, a server or guest, had recorded part of the incident on their phone. The video was shaky and the audio unclear, but you could see Vivian grab Amira's uniform and tear it. You could see Amira's face, calm and dignified even in humiliation. The video appeared on social media with the caption, "Racist woman tears black waitress's dress at charity gala. This is your elite society." Within hours, it had been viewed 10,000 times. By the next morning, it was approaching 1 million. News outlets picked it up. Think pieces appeared. The Grand Ashford Hotel issued a statement condemning discrimination while carefully avoiding naming anyone involved. But the internet is relentless. Within 2 days, someone had identified Vivian Locke. Ethan's phone rang constantly. His PR team was in crisis mode. The company's board called an emergency meeting, but it was Amira's phone call that gutted him. "Have you seen it?" she asked, her voice tight. "I've seen it. My office is being flooded with donations," she said. "People calling me brave, calling me strong. But Ethan, I don't want this. I don't want to be famous for being humiliated." "I know," he said. "I'm so sorry this is happening to you again. Your wife must be furious." That was an understatement. Vivian was at home in a rage, drinking wine at noon and screaming at anyone who called. Her friends weren't returning messages. Her social media accounts were being bombarded with hate. The charitable organizations she belonged to were quietly asking her to step down from boards. Everything she had built, her entire social standing, was crumbling, and she blamed Ethan. "This is your fault," she spat at him that evening. "You've been visiting that woman. Don't think I don't know. People have seen you." "I've been visiting her nonprofit," Ethan corrected. "Supporting good work." "Supporting her, you mean?" Vivian's eyes were wild. "You're having an affair." "I'm not," Ethan said firmly. "But I won't apologize for treating her like a human being. Something you failed to do. I won't let you destroy everything we've built together for some charity case." Ethan looked at his wife, really looked at her, and realized something he'd been avoiding for years. "We didn't build anything together, Vivian. We built the appearance of something. But there's nothing real underneath." He turned and walked out, leaving her alone in the mansion they shared but had never made into a home. The video had been viral for a week when Vivian discovered the bank transfer. She had been going through Ethan's business records, looking for something she could use, some proof of the affair she was convinced he was having. What she found instead was a wire transfer for $50,000 to Foundations First. $50,000 to that woman's organization. Vivian stood in Ethan's study, staring at the bank statement in her trembling hands. This wasn't just charity. This was betrayal. He had given that woman more money than Vivian had spent on her last 3 shopping trips combined. When Ethan came home that evening, she was waiting for him. $50,000, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You gave her $50,000. Ethan set down his briefcase, unsurprised. He'd known she would find out eventually. It was a donation to her nonprofit. They do good work. "Don't lie to me." Vivian threw the papers at him. They scattered across the marble floor. "You're sleeping with her. That's what this is. You're paying for her services." For the first time in their marriage, Ethan raised his voice. "How dare you? How dare you reduce everything to something so crude? That money is helping 30 kids get an education. It's paying for books and supplies and tutors. It's making a real difference in people's lives. It's making a difference in her life." Vivian shot back. "You're so transparent, Ethan. Playing the white savior, rescuing the poor black girl from poverty." "This isn't about race," Ethan said firmly. "This is about decency. Something you seem to have forgotten." "Decency?" Vivian laughed bitterly. "You want to talk about decency? You've been spending time with another woman, giving her money, and I'm supposed to just accept it?" "It wasn't charity," Ethan said, his voice dropping. "It was the right thing to do. Something I should have done the night you assaulted her." The word hung in the air between them. Assaulted. Not incident. Not misunderstanding. Assault. Vivian's face went white with rage. "Get out. Get out of this house." "Gladly," Ethan said, and he meant it. But Vivian wasn't done. If she was going down, she would take both of them with her. The next morning, a story appeared on several gossip blogs. The headline read, "Gala Victim Seduces Married Millionaire." The article was filled with twisted half-truths and outright lies. It claimed Amira had deliberately spilled wine to get Vivian's attention, that she had been meeting with Ethan secretly for weeks, that the nonprofit was just a front for their affair. The photos accompanying the article showed Ethan entering Amira's office building, taken from across the street with a telephoto lens. The images were innocent, just a man walking through a door, but the captions made them look sordid. Amira saw it when she arrived at the office that morning. Several students were already there, whispering and looking at their phones. When she walked in, they went quiet. "Miss Cole," one of the girls said hesitantly, "is it true, the stuff they're saying online?" "No," Amira said firmly. "It's not true. None of it." But even as she said it, she could see doubt in their eyes. By noon, 3 sponsors had called to withdraw funding, citing concerns about the organization's public image. By afternoon, 2 parents had pulled their kids from the program. Amira sat in her office, head in her hands, trying not to cry. She had worked for 3 years to build this program, to earn trust in a community that had every reason to be suspicious. And now, because of lies and malice, it was falling apart. Her phone rang. "Ethan, I saw the articles," he said. Amira, I'm so sorry. Your wife did this. It wasn't a question. I don't have proof, but yes, I believe she did. She's destroying my life because you gave my nonprofit money. Amira's voice cracked. Kids are being hurt because of me. Because I met you. This isn't your fault, Ethan said firmly. Don't let her make you believe that. Then whose fault is it? Amira asked. Maybe if I just quit that night. Maybe if I hadn't let you visit. Maybe if I just stayed in my place like she wanted. Don't say that, Ethan pleaded. Don't let her win by making you smaller. But Amira was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of being strong. I have to go, she said, and hung up. Ethan stared at his phone, feeling helpless. Then he made a decision. He called his assistant. Rachel, set up a press conference for tomorrow morning. I'm going to make a statement. About what, Mr. Locke? About the truth. The next morning, Ethan stood before a room full of reporters and cameras. His company's PR team had tried to talk him out of it, warning him about the legal and financial implications. His lawyers had been on the phone all night, trying to prepare him for questions. He ignored all of them and spoke from the heart. My name is Ethan Locke, and I'm here to address the recent articles and speculation about myself and Amira Cole. He paused, looking directly into the cameras. The articles are lies. Miss Cole and I are not having an affair. We're not involved romantically in any way. What we have is mutual respect, which is something my wife failed to show her 3 weeks ago at a charity gala. Reporters leaned forward, sensing a bigger story. Many of you have seen the video of my wife tearing Ms. Cole's uniform at that event. What you don't know is what preceded that moment. My wife deliberately caused Ms. Cole to spill wine, then publicly humiliated her before physically assaulting her. I witnessed all of this, and I did nothing. That is my shame to bear. He took a breath, steadying himself. I later discovered that Miss Cole is not just a part-time server. She is an engineer and the founder of Foundations First, a nonprofit that provides educational support to underprivileged youth in our city. She works a service job to fund her real calling, which is helping kids who need someone to believe in them. Yes, I made a substantial donation to her organization, not because of any romantic involvement, but because her work deserves support, because 32 kids deserve a chance at a better future, and because it was the right thing to do. A reporter raised her hand. Mr. Locke, do you think your wife's behavior was racially motivated? Ethan paused, choosing his words carefully. I think my wife acted out of insecurity and cruelty. Whether race played a role in her actions, you'd have to ask her. But I will say this. A person's worth is not determined by their job title or the color of their skin. Miss Cole showed more grace and dignity in that moment than anyone else in that ballroom, including myself. In your marriage? Another reporter asked. Is over, Ethan said simply. I will be filing for divorce. The room erupted with questions, but Ethan held up his hand. That's all I have to say. Thank you. The clip went viral within an hour. Ethan Locke, multi-millionaire businessman, publicly defending a black woman against accusations of impropriety and admitting his own failures. It was the kind of story that cut through the noise. Public opinion shifted almost immediately. The gossip articles were taken down. Apologies were issued. People began researching Foundations First, learning about the good work Amira had been doing for years. Donations poured in. But for Vivian, watching from her mansion, it was the final humiliation. Her husband had chosen that woman over her. Not romantically perhaps, but morally. And the whole world now knew it. Her friends had abandoned her. Her social clubs had quietly asked her to resign. Her name, once synonymous with charity and high society, was now linked to racism and cruelty. She sat alone in her dressing room, surrounded by designer clothes and jewelry that suddenly seemed worthless. Her reflection in the mirror showed a woman she barely recognized. Makeup smeared from crying, hair uncombed, eyes red and desperate. She had spent her entire life building an image, a persona of elegance and importance. And now it was gone, destroyed by her own hand in a moment of rage. Vivian picked up her phone and, before she could change her mind, dialed a number she had called 1,000 times over the years. Her closest friend, Catherine. Catherine, it's me. There was a long pause. Vivian, I don't think we should talk right now. Please, Vivian said, her voice breaking. Please, I just need someone to talk to. I'm sorry, Catherine said, and she actually sounded like she meant it. But people don't want to be seen with you right now. I have to think about my own reputation. The line went dead. Vivian threw the phone across the room, watching it shatter against the wall. Then she reached for the bottle of wine she'd been drinking since noon. Meanwhile, at the Foundation's first office, Amira watched Ethan's press conference on her laptop, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness, but of something more complex. Gratitude, vindication, and a deep, aching exhaustion. One of her students, 17-year-old named Marcus, knocked on the office door. "Miss Cole, you okay?" Amira wiped her eyes and smiled. "Yeah, Marcus, I am okay. That guy, Mr. Locke, he really stood up for you." "Yeah, he did." "That took guts," Marcus said, admitting he was wrong in front of everybody like that. Amira nodded. It had taken guts. More than she'd expected from a man born into privilege and wealth. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "I'm sorry if that made things harder for you. I just needed people to know the truth." She typed back, "Thank you for all of it." Then she set down her phone and went back to work. Because no matter what chaos swirled around her, these kids still needed help with their homework. They still needed someone to believe in them. And that, she realized, was what really mattered. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The storm wasn't over, not yet. But for the first time since that terrible night at the gala, Amira felt like maybe, just maybe, things might actually be okay. The press conference had shifted public opinion, but it hadn't ended Vivian's obsession with revenge. She sat in her mansion's library that evening, scrolling through endless articles praising Ethan's honesty and Amira's grace. Each headline felt like another nail in the coffin of her reputation. Her fingers trembled as she refilled her wine glass for the fourth time that hour. Then she saw something that made her pause. A local news segment about foundations first showed footage of the community center. And there, in the background of one shot, she spotted Ethan's car parked outside. Vivian checked the timestamp. 7:30 in the evening, 2 days ago. Long after normal business hours. Something cold and sharp settled in her chest. She grabbed her coat and car keys, ignoring the fact that she'd been drinking. She needed to see for herself what was really happening between her husband and that woman. 40 minutes later, Vivian sat in her sedan across the street from the modest storefront, engine idling. The lights inside were still on, and through the windows she could see Amira moving around, straightening chairs and organizing papers. Then Ethan's car pulled up. Vivian watched as he got out, carrying what looked like pizza boxes. He knocked on the door, and Amira let him in, smiling. Not a professional smile. Something warmer, more genuine. Vivian's hands gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. Through the window, she watched them sit at one of the student tables, eating pizza and talking. She couldn't hear their words, but she could see their body language. The way Ethan leaned forward when Amira spoke. The way Amira laughed at something he said. The comfortable ease between them. Then came the moment that made Vivian's breath catch. Amira was saying something, her expression serious and vulnerable. Ethan reached across the table and placed his hand over hers, just for a moment. A gesture of comfort, nothing more. But through Vivian's lens of jealousy and pain, it looked like so much more. She grabbed her phone and snapped a photo. The angle was perfect, the dim lighting making it look intimate and secretive. The perfect scandal. Vivian sat there for another 20 minutes, taking more photos as they talked. When Ethan finally left and Amira locked up, Vivian pulled away, already composing the anonymous message she would send to every tabloid and gossip site she could find. By morning, the photo was everywhere. The caption read, "The charity girl who ruined a marriage caught in late-night rendezvous with millionaire husband." Amira woke to her phone buzzing nonstop. Text messages from concerned friends. Emails from reporters requesting comments. Voicemails from strangers calling her horrible names. She grabbed her laptop and searched her name, and her stomach dropped. The photo showed her and Ethan at the table, his hand on hers, both of them looking at each other with soft expressions. Taken out of context, it looked exactly like what the headlines claimed. An affair. A secret relationship. everything Vivian had accused them of. Her hand shook as she read the comments. Half called her a homewrecker. The other half defended her, but speculated about the nature of her relationship with Ethan. Both sides missed the point entirely. They had done nothing wrong. But perception was reality, and the perception was damning. By the time Amira arrived at the office, 3 students were waiting outside with their parents. One mother pulled her daughter away the moment Amira approached. "We won't have our children influenced by someone with such poor moral character," the woman said coldly. "Mrs. Patterson, please," Amira started, but the woman was already walking away. Inside, her phone wouldn't stop ringing. 2 more sponsors called to withdraw funding. The building's landlord left a message saying they were concerned about negative publicity affecting other tenants. Even Maria from the hotel called, her voice apologetic but firm. The management had let Amira go, citing the ongoing controversy. Amira sat at her desk, watching everything she had built crumble around her. 3 years of work. 3 years of earning trust in this community. Gone because of lies and manipulation. When Ethan called, she almost didn't answer. "Amira, I saw the photos. This is ridiculous. We were just talking. It doesn't matter what we were doing," Amira said, her voice flat with exhaustion. "People believe what they want to believe. And right now, they want to believe I'm sleeping with a married man. Then I'll issue another statement. I'll explain exactly what happened that night." "No," Amira said firmly. "Every time you defend me, it makes it worse. People think you're covering for your mistress. Your words don't help me anymore, Ethan. They just prove I can't succeed without you. That's not true, isn't it?" Amira's voice cracked. "Look at what's happening. My students are leaving. My funding is disappearing. Everything I worked for is being destroyed because your wife won't let this go. I'm filing for divorce," Ethan said. "The papers are already drawn up. That doesn't fix what's happening to me right now." Amira closed her eyes. "I have to go. I have parents to call, damage to control. If I even can." She hung up before he could respond. Ethan stood in his office, staring at his phone. His assistant knocked and entered, her expression grim. "The board wants to meet with you. They're concerned about the publicity affecting company reputation." "Let them be concerned," Ethan said. "Mr. Locke, they're talking about asking you to step down as CEO." That made him pause. His company, the business he'd built over 15 years, was now at risk because of his association with Amira. Or rather, because of his wife's vindictive campaign against her. "Schedule the meeting," he said quietly. "And Rachel? Find out who took those photos. I want to know if my wife hired someone." Meanwhile, Amira stood in front of her remaining students. Only 12 had shown up today, down from a usual 32. Their faces were confused and worried. These were kids who had been abandoned before, who had learned not to trust adults who promised to stick around. "I know you've heard things about me," Amira said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I know people are saying I did something wrong, but I want you to understand something important." She looked at each of them, making eye contact. "You can't control what people say about you. You can't control the rumors or the lies or the assumptions. You can only control how you respond. You can let it make you smaller, make you hide, make you give up, or you can stand tall and keep doing what you know is right." Marcus, the 17-year-old who had witnessed her watching Ethan's press conference, raised his hand. "So you're not quitting?" "No," Amira said, even though part of her wanted to. "I'm not quitting, because you deserve better than another adult who gives up when things get hard." One of the girls started crying. "My mom says I can't come here anymore. She says you're a bad influence." Amira knelt beside the girl's chair. "Then you tell your mom that Miss Cole taught you that standing up for the truth matters more than what other people think. Can you do that?" The girl nodded, wiping her eyes. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. A local journalist who had been following the story reached out to the hotel's security team. She wanted to see the full footage from the gala, not just the viral clip. After some negotiation and a generous payment, she got access to the complete recording. The video showed everything. Vivian deliberately moving her chair into Amira's path. Vivian grabbing the uniform. The tear. But it also showed something else. Earlier in the evening, when Ethan had helped Amira steady the tray, Vivian's face in the background. the cold rage in her expression as she watched them smile at each other. The journalist published her article that evening. The real story behind the gala incident. A timeline of jealousy and manipulation. The video spread even faster than the original clip had. This time, there was no ambiguity. Vivian Locke had deliberately humiliated Amira Cole out of jealousy. Everything that followed, every lie and leaked photo, was part of a campaign of revenge. Vivian was sitting in her bedroom when her phone started buzzing with notifications. She pulled up the news article and watched the security footage. Watch herself, caught on camera, orchestrating Amira's humiliation with cold calculation. The comments were brutal. Words like racist, cruel, pathetic filled the screen. Her face was everywhere, frozen in that moment of petty rage. She threw her phone across the room and screamed. Then she grabbed the wine glass from her nightstand and hurled it at the wall. It shattered, red liquid running down the expensive wallpaper like blood. For the first time, Vivian saw herself clearly. Not as the wronged wife, not as the victim of circumstance, but as the villain of this story. The cruel woman who had destroyed another person's life out of insecurity and spite. She collapsed on her bed, sobbing. Not tears of self-pity, but tears of genuine horror at what she had become. The next morning brought a reckoning. 3 major news networks ran segments on the full security footage. Legal experts discussed whether Vivian could face charges for assault. Social media exploded with commentary, most of it condemning her behavior. The organizations where Vivian served on boards issued formal statements revoking her memberships. The country club, where she had lunched for 20 years, sent a letter disinviting her. Even her favorite boutiques quietly suggested she shop elsewhere, worried about other customers seeing her. Ethan held a brief press conference that morning, this time with his lawyers present. He confirmed he was filing for divorce and stated clearly that his wife's actions did not represent his values or his company's values. He refused to answer questions about Amira, saying only that she deserved privacy and respect. The public response was overwhelming. Foundations first received so many donations that Amira had to set up a separate account to manage them. Corporations reached out offering partnerships. Universities invited her to speak. The building's landlord called to apologize and offered to reduce the rent. But Amira felt strangely empty. Yes, her program was saved. Yes, the truth was out. But the cost had been so high. Her privacy was gone. Her name was known for all the wrong reasons. She hadn't wanted to be famous. She had just wanted to help kids. When a major talk show invited her for an interview, offering a substantial appearance fee, she declined. "I don't want fame from pain," she told her assistant, a volunteer named Jennifer. "I just want my peace back." That afternoon, as Amira was closing up the office, someone knocked on the door. She opened it to find Vivian Locke standing there. Vivian looked nothing like the polished woman from a gala. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore jeans and a simple sweater. No makeup, no jewelry. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. "What are you doing here?" Amira asked, instinctively stepping back. "I needed to see you," Vivian said, her voice hoarse. "I needed to say this to your face, not through some public statement crafted by lawyers." "Say what?" "That I'm sorry, that I was wrong, that everything I did to you was cruel and unforgivable." Vivian's hands were shaking. "I saw the video, the full one. I saw my face. I saw what I became." Amira crossed her arms, keeping her distance. "You saw it 3 weeks ago when you tore my uniform. You saw it when you sent those photos to the press. You saw it every time you tried to destroy me. Why does seeing it on camera make a difference?" "Because I couldn't lie to myself anymore," Vivian said, tears starting to fall. "I could justify everything when it was just in my head. But seeing it, seeing the hate on my face, the calculation, I looked like a monster." "You acted like one," Amira said flatly. "I know." Vivian's voice broke. "I know I did, and I can't take it back. I can't undo what I did to you. But I need you to know that it was never really about you." "Then what was it about?" "Me," Vivian said. "My insecurity, my jealousy, my terror of becoming irrelevant." She wiped her eyes roughly. "I spent my whole life building this image. The perfect wife, the perfect hostess, the perfect society woman. And somewhere along the way, I realized the image was all I had. There was nothing real underneath. So you try to destroy me to feel better about yourself. Yes, Vivian admitted. I saw Ethan smile at you. Just smile. And I knew that he never smiled at me that way anymore. That he probably never had. And instead of looking at why that was, instead of examining my own choices, I made you the enemy. Amira studied the woman in front of her. Vivian looked broken, diminished. Part of Amira wanted to take satisfaction in that. But mostly, she just felt tired. Why did you really come here? Amira asked. What do you want from me? Vivian reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. I'm selling my jewelry, my designer clothes, everything I spent years collecting. The money from the sales is going to your foundation. It's not enough to make up for what I did, but it's something. She held out the envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $75,000. Amira stared at it. I don't want your money. I know, Vivian said, but those kids need it. And maybe if something good can come from all this ugliness, maybe that's the start of redemption. Redemption doesn't start with money, Amira said quietly. It starts with humility, with real change, not just guilt-driven gestures. Then tell me what to do, Vivian pleaded. Tell me how to make this right. I can't tell you that, Amira said. That's work you have to do yourself. You have to figure out who you want to be instead of who you've been. Vivian nodded, still holding out the envelope. Will you take it? Please? Not for me, but for the kids who need it. After a long moment, Amira took the check. Not because she forgave Vivian, not because money could fix what had been broken, but because 12 students had shown up that day when there should have been 32, and she needed every resource she could get to rebuild their trust. Thank you, Vivian whispered. Then, before Amira could respond, she said, I slapped you in my mind 1,000 times while I watched you on the news. I wanted to hurt you so badly. But standing here now, I realize you never did anything to me. I did this all to myself. She turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Ethan was right about you. You are remarkable, and I was terrified of that. Then she was gone, disappearing into the evening shadows. Amira stood in the doorway, holding the check, feeling an odd mix of emotions. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of understanding. Vivian was a woman who had built her identity on sand, and when it washed away, she had nothing left to stand on. That night, Ethan called. I heard Vivian went to see you. How did you know? She called me after. She wanted me to know she apologized. He paused. Did she? Yes. And she wrote a check to the foundation. That's something, I suppose. It's a start, Amira said. Not redemption, but a start. They were quiet for a moment. Then Ethan said, I'm moving out of the house. The divorce papers were served today. How do you feel about that? Relieved, he admitted. I should have done it years ago. We've been strangers pretending to be married for longer than either of us wanted to admit. I'm sorry it ended this way. I'm not, Ethan said. It should have ended before it involved you. Before Vivian hurt you. That's my real regret. Another pause, longer this time. Amira, Ethan said carefully, people are going to keep speculating about us. About whether there's something between us. I know. Does that bother you? It bothers me that people might think I only succeeded because of you, Amira said honestly. That they'll see the donations and the support and think I earned it by being associated with a wealthy man instead of by doing good work. Then let them see who you really are, Ethan said. Keep doing what you do. Let your work speak for itself. Eventually, the noise will fade. Will it? Yes, he said firmly. Because you're not defined by this moment. You're defined by every kid you've helped, every life you've touched, every choice you've made to stand up when it would have been easier to give up. Amira felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you for believing that. It's not belief. It's observation. After they hung up, Amira sat in her quiet office, looking at the walls covered in student drawings and thank you notes. This was her legacy. Not fame, not money, not association with anyone else. Just the simple, profound impact of showing up every day and doing work that mattered. The next day, she deposited Vivian's check and used it to hire 2 new tutors. She called the parents who had pulled their kids from the program and invited them to come see what foundations first really did. Some agreed, some didn't. But slowly, steadily, trust began to rebuild. Vivian, meanwhile, started attending therapy sessions. Her therapist, Dr. Sarah Morrison, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who didn't let Vivian hide behind excuses or self-pity. "You're here because your world collapsed," Dr. Morrison said in their first session. "Now you have a choice. You can try to rebuild the same image you had before, or you can build something real." "I don't know how to be real," Vivian admitted. "I've been performing for so long." "Then it's time to learn," Dr. Morrison said. Weeks passed. The news cycle moved on to other scandals, other stories. Ethan filed formal divorce papers, and Vivian didn't contest them. They divided their assets quietly, without drama. The mansion went up for sale. Foundations first expanded to a second location. Amira hired staff to help manage the growing program, allowing her to focus on curriculum development and fundraising. She declined most media requests, preferring to let her work speak for itself. One evening, Marcus came to her office with a college acceptance letter. He'd been accepted to State University on a full scholarship, the same program Amira had attended. "You did this," he said, grinning. "You helped me believe I could." "No," Amira said, hugging him. "You did this. I just showed you the path." That night, Amira went home to her small apartment and sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. So much had changed in just a few months. She had been humiliated, vindicated, attacked, and defended. Her life had been turned upside down, but she had survived. More than that, she had grown. And maybe, she thought, that was the real story. Not the dramatic moment when fabric tore in a ballroom, but the quiet strength it took to keep showing up, keep doing the work, keep believing that dignity was something no one could take from you. It could only be surrendered. And Amira had never surrendered hers. 6 months had passed since the night that changed everything. Amira stood in her bedroom, looking at the elegant white gown hanging on the back of her door. The dress was simple but beautiful, with clean lines and a subtle elegance that spoke of confidence rather than trying to impress anyone. She had designed it herself. The invitation sat on her dresser, embossed letters on cream cardstock. The Grand Ashford Hotel was hosting another charity gala, this time benefiting educational programs for underserved communities. And they had asked Amira to be the keynote speaker. The irony wasn't lost on her. 6 months ago, she had walked out the service entrance of that hotel with her uniform torn and her dignity tested. Now she was returning through the front entrance as the guest of honor. Jennifer knocked on her apartment door. "You ready? The car will be here in 10 minutes. Almost Amira called back. She slipped into the dress, zipping it up carefully. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she thought about that other white uniform, the one that had been torn and discarded like it meant nothing. This time, the white dress was her choice, her design, her statement. She had reclaimed it. The ballroom looked exactly as she remembered it. Crystal chandeliers casting golden light across marble floors. Tables draped in ivory linen. The same orchestra playing soft classical music. But this time, when Amira walked through those doors, conversations paused for a different reason. Guests turned to look at her with admiration and respect. The event coordinator rushed over, beaming. "Miss Cole, we're so honored to have you here. Your table is right up front, near the podium." Amira smiled, following her through the crowd. She recognized some faces from that night. A few people approached to introduce themselves, to say they donated to foundations first, to tell her how inspired they were by her story. She accepted their words graciously, even though part of her still wished she was known for her work rather than for what had been done to her. Then she saw Ethan. He was sitting at a table in the back, dressed in a dark suit, his expression calm but watchful. When their eyes met, he smiled that same genuine smile she remembered from months ago. He raised his glass slightly in acknowledgement, but didn't approach. He was there to support her, not to overshadow her moment. The divorce had been finalized 2 months ago. Ethan had left his company to start a consulting firm that exclusively worked with minority-owned businesses and nonprofits. He was building something new, something that mattered to him. They had kept in touch, careful to maintain appropriate boundaries while his divorce proceeded. But there was something between them now, something neither of them had named yet. As Amira took her seat, she noticed a figure standing near the entrance. A woman in a modest navy dress, her blonde hair pulled back simply. No jewelry except for a simple watch. No designer labels or obvious wealth. Vivian Locke. Amira's breath caught. She hadn't expected this. Hadn't known Vivian would be here. Vivian stood uncertainly by the door, clearly debating whether to stay or leave. She looked so different from the woman who had torn Amira's uniform. Smaller somehow, more human. Their eyes met across the ballroom. Vivian's face showed a mixture of nervousness and something that looked like hope. She didn't approach. She simply stood there, as if waiting for permission to exist in the same space. Amira gave a small nod. Not forgiveness necessarily, but acknowledgement. Vivian visibly relaxed and found a seat in the very back of the room, as far from the spotlight as possible. The evening proceeded with dinner and silent auction items. Amira found herself surprisingly calm, even as the time for her speech approached. She had spent weeks preparing, writing and rewriting until the words felt true. Finally, the host introduced her. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present our keynote speaker, a woman who turned personal adversity into community impact, an engineer, educator, and advocate who reminds us all that dignity is not given by others but claimed by ourselves. Please welcome Amira Cole. The applause was genuine and warm. Amira walked to the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. So she recognized. Most she didn't, but they were all looking at her with respect. Thank you for that introduction, she began, her voice steady and clear. 6 months ago, I stood in this ballroom, but I wasn't standing here at this podium. I was standing there. She gestured toward the service area, wearing a white uniform, carrying trays, try to be invisible. The room was absolutely silent. That night, something happened that changed my life, but not in the way you might think. Yes, I was humiliated. Yes, I was hurt. But what that night really taught me was something I already knew but had forgotten. That dignity isn't about where you stand in a room. It's about who you are when people try to make you feel small. She paused, letting the words settle. I grew up without much. My parents died when I was young, and my grandmother raised me on a housekeeper's salary. She worked in houses like this, serving people who often didn't see her as fully human. But she always told me, "Baby girl, you're not defined by what others think of you. You are defined by what you do when no one is watching." Amira's voice grew stronger. So, I want to talk about the people no one watches. The students in neighborhoods that society has written off. The kids who are told they're not smart enough, not good enough, that they should lower their expectations because people like them don't achieve great things. She scanned the audience. 3 years ago, I started Foundations first with 5 students in my apartment. We didn't have funding or facilities or fancy programs. We just had belief. Belief that every kid deserves someone to see their potential. This year, 73 students participated in our program. 22 of them are now in college on scholarships. That's not because of me. That's because someone believed in them. The audience was leaning forward now, fully engaged. But here's what I really want you to understand. Sometimes, the people who break you are the same ones who show you what you're made of. Sometimes, the moments that feel like endings are actually beginnings. That night in this ballroom felt like the worst moment of my life. But it led to opportunities one never imagined. Not because of what happened to me, but because of how I chose to respond. Amira's voice softened. I could have quit. I could have let anger and hurt define me. But my students needed me to be stronger than that. They needed to see that when life knocks you down, you get back up. Not with violence or revenge, but with grace and determination. She paused, making eye contact with people around the room. Real strength isn't about fighting back against those who hurt you. It's about refusing to let their actions change who you are. It's about standing in your truth, even when others try to write a different story about you. In the back of the room, Vivian had tears streaming down her face. Ethan watched Amira with undisguised pride. And throughout the ballroom, people nodded, moved by words that spoke to something deeper than one night's drama. So, I want to thank you all for being here tonight, for supporting programs like mine. But more than that, I want to challenge you. Look around at the people serving your dinner tonight. The ones parking your cars. The ones you pass without seeing. Remember that each of them has dreams and dignity and worth that has nothing to do with their job title. See them. Acknowledge them. Because everyone deserves to be seen. The applause started slowly, then built into a standing ovation. Amira stood at the podium, taking it in, feeling the full weight of how far she had come. After her speech, people lined up to speak with her. Business leaders offered partnerships. Donors wrote checks. University representatives extended invitations. But the moment that mattered most came when Vivian finally approached. The crowd had thinned by then, and Amira was gathering her belongings. Vivian walked up slowly, her hands clutched together nervously. "That was beautiful," Vivian said quietly. "What you said about dignity, about grace. I'm still learning what those words mean." Amira turned to face her. "Are you?" "Yes," Vivian said. "I've been volunteering at a women's shelter, serving meals, cleaning tables. The work you used to do that I mocked. It's humbling. And necessary. Why are you doing it?" "Because I need to understand what I took for granted," Vivian said. "Because I need to become someone different than who I was." She reached into her purse and pulled out a white envelope. "I brought something for you." Amira opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter and a folded piece of fabric. The fabric was white silk, with a small embroidered patch showing the foundation's first logo. "I kept a piece of your uniform," Vivian admitted. "From that night. I don't know why. Maybe as a reminder of what I'd done. I had it embroidered with your foundation's logo. Not to erase what happened, but to acknowledge that something good grew from something terrible." Amira held the fabric, feeling its softness. "This doesn't erase anything." "I know," Vivian said, "but maybe it acknowledges that redemption is possible. That change is real. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Amira. I know I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that the person who hurt you is trying very hard not to be that person anymore." Amira looked at the woman before her and saw genuine transformation. Not complete, not perfect, but real. "Redemption doesn't start with money or gestures," Amira said, echoing her words from months ago. "But this is more than a gesture, isn't it?" "It's an acknowledgement," Vivian said, "of what I took from you, and what you show me I was missing." They stood there for a moment, two women whose lives had become entangled in the worst way possible, now finding some kind of peace. "I hope you find what you're looking for," Amira said finally. "I hope you get everything you deserve," Vivian replied. Then she smiled faintly, which, given who you are, is considerable. Vivian left quietly, slipping out through a side door. She had come to witness Amira's triumph, to see the woman she had tried to destroy standing tall and unbroken. It was the least she could do. Amira stepped outside into the cool night air. The same alley where she had stood crying 6 months ago. But this time, instead of tears, she felt peace. That was quite a speech. She turned to find Ethan leaning against the building, his jacket slung over his shoulder. "You're still here," she said. "I want to make sure you were okay." "Big night." "I'm more than okay," Amira said, meaning it. They stood together in comfortable silence. Then Ethan said, "My divorce is final. Has been for 2 months. I know, and I've been thinking about something you said. About not wanting people to think you succeeded because of me. I remember." "You didn't," Ethan said firmly. "You succeeded in spite of everything. In spite of cruelty and lies and obstacles that would have crushed most people. What you built yourself." "I know that now," Amira said. "It took me a while, but I know it." "Good," Ethan said, "because I'd like to take you to dinner sometime. Not as a donor to your foundation. Not as someone trying to make up for past mistakes. Just as someone who admires you and would like to know you better." Amira smiled. "Are you asking me on a date, Mr. Locke?" "I am," he said. "Is that okay?" "It's more than okay," Amira said. 1 year after the gala, Foundations first had grown into a nationally recognized program. Amira had opened 4 locations across the city, serving over 200 students. Corporate partnerships provided stable funding. Universities recruited her graduates. Politicians cited her program as a model for community-based education. But Amira remained grounded, still teaching classes twice a week, still learning her students' names and their struggles. Ethan's consulting firm had helped launch 17 minority-owned businesses in the past year. His first and largest client remained Foundation's first, though by now their relationship had evolved far beyond professional. They sat together in a new restaurant downtown, celebrating their one-year anniversary. Not of the gala incident, but of their first official date. "I never thought I'd be grateful for that night," Amira said, holding Ethan's hand across the table. "But it brought me to you. It pushed me to grow in ways I hadn't imagined." "You would have grown anyway," Ethan said. "You're one of those rare people who keeps reaching for better, no matter what." "Maybe," Amira smiled. "But I learned something important, that sometimes the worst moments crack us open so the light can get in." As they finished dinner, Ethan pulled out a small box. Amira's breath caught. "Before you panic," he said, grinning, "it's not an engagement ring. Not yet, anyway." Inside was a key on a silver chain. "What's this?" "You'll see tomorrow," Ethan said mysteriously. "Meet me at the Grand Ashford at noon." The next day, Amira arrived at the hotel to find Ethan waiting in the lobby with a team of lawyers and the hotel's general manager. She looked between them, confused. "What's going on?" The general manager stepped forward. "Miss Cole, it's my pleasure to inform you that ownership of the Grand Ashford Hotel has been transferred to the Foundation's first charitable trust, effective immediately." Amira stared at him. "What?" Ethan took her hand. "I bought the hotel 6 months ago, quietly, through a series of holding companies so no one would know. And today, I'm signing it over to your foundation. The hotel will continue operating as a business, but all profits will fund your educational programs." "You bought a hotel," Amira said slowly, trying to process this. "You bought the hotel where everything happened. The place where you were humiliated is now yours," Ethan said. "The ballroom where someone tried to take your dignity now belongs to you." It seemed appropriate. Tears filled Amira's eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll walk through that ballroom with me." As its owner, they walked hand in hand through the grand entrance, past the marble floors and crystal chandeliers, into the ballroom where it had all begun. Amira stood in the center of the room, exactly where she had stood when her uniform was torn. "Do you remember standing here?" Ethan asked. "I remember everything about that night." "What does it feel like now?" Amira closed her eyes, breathing in the moment. "Like coming full circle. Like reclaiming something I didn't even know I'd lost." She opened her eyes and smiled. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible, for standing up when it mattered, for all of it." "Thank you," Ethan said, "for teaching me what real strength looks like." Later that week, Amira organized a small gathering at the hotel. Her students, past and present, filled one of the private dining rooms. Marcus was there, home from college for the summer. The girl who had cried in class was there, now thriving in the program. Jennifer, who had volunteered and was now the Foundation's associate director, coordinated everything. Amira stood before them, wearing another white dress, simple and elegant like the one from the gala speech. "I want to tell you something," she said to the room full of young faces. "A year ago, something bad happened to me in this hotel. Someone tried to make me feel worthless because of the color of my skin and the job I was doing. And for a moment, it worked. I felt small." The students listened intently. "But you know what I learned? Other people's hatred says nothing about your worth. Their cruelty reveals who they are, not who you are. And when someone tries to tear you down, you have a choice. You can let it destroy you, or you can let it reveal your strength." She gestured around the room. "This hotel now belongs to our foundation. The place where I was meant to feel powerless is now the source of power for all of you. Your education, your future, your dreams are being funded by this building." Marcus stood up. "Miss Cole taught me something important. She taught me that success isn't about revenge or proving people wrong. It's about proving yourself right, about living your values even when it's hard." The room erupted in applause. That evening, as the students left, Vivian appeared in the hotel lobby. She had been volunteering regularly at the women's shelter for 8 months now. Her therapist had helped her understand that the image she'd spent her life building had been a prison of her own making. She approached Amira carefully. "I heard about the hotel. That's incredible." "It is," Amira agreed. I wanted you to know something, Vivian said. I've been accepted as a volunteer coordinator at a nonprofit that helps formerly incarcerated women find employment. It's not much, but it's real work. Meaningful work. I'm glad, Amira said, meaning it. I'll probably never fully make up for what I did to you, Vivian said. But I'm trying to become someone who adds light instead of darkness. That's something. It's everything, Amira said softly. Vivian pulled something from her bag. A folded white napkin, embroidered with the foundation's first logo in blue thread. I've been learning to embroider in therapy. It helps me focus. I made this for you. For the hotel. Amira took it, running her fingers over the careful stitches. It's beautiful. It's an apology that will never be enough, Vivian said. But it's all I have to give. She left quietly, and Amira watched her go. The woman who had once embodied cruelty and prejudice was now learning humility and service. Change was possible. Redemption was real. Months passed. Foundations first continued to grow. Ethan proposed, and Amira said yes. They planned a small wedding, nothing like the grand society affairs Ethan had once endured. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon, Amira stood in the Grand Ashford ballroom, now filled with students working on college applications. The space that had once represented her lowest moment now represented her greatest achievement. The maitre d' from that first night approached her. He had stayed on as manager under the new ownership. "Miss Cole, there's someone here to see you." A young woman stood in the entrance, maybe 19 or 20, looking nervous. She had dark skin and wore a crisp white uniform from another hotel. "Can I help you?" Amira asked. "My name is Taylor," the girl said. "I saw your speech online, the one from last year, and I just wanted to meet you because last week something similar happened to me. A guest was cruel, and I didn't know how to handle it. But then I remembered what you said about dignity being something no one can take from you." Amira's heart swelled. "Come sit with me." They talked for an hour. Amira shared her story in full, the parts that hadn't made the news. The doubt, the fear, the moments she wanted to quit. And Taylor shared her own struggles, her own dreams. "You can do this," Amira told her. "Whatever you're working toward, you can do it. How do you know? Because you're here. Because you didn't let cruelty make you smaller. That's how I know." When Taylor left, she had Amira's phone number and an invitation to visit Foundations first anytime she needed support or guidance. Ethan appeared beside Amira. Another life changed? Maybe, Amira said. Or maybe she just needed to know she wasn't alone. "That's what you do best," Ethan said, wrapping his arm around her. "You show people they're not alone." That evening, as the sun set over the city, Amira stood at the window of her office in the hotel. Her office, in a building that was now dedicated to helping kids achieve their dreams. She thought about her grandmother, wished she could see this, wished she could tell her that the lessons about dignity and grace had carried her through the hardest moments. That standing tall, when others try to make you small, was the greatest victory of all. The torn uniform was framed in her office now, alongside the embroidered patch Vivian had given her. Not as a reminder of pain, but as a testament to transformation. Both hers and Vivian's. Amira smiled and turned back to her work. There were grant applications to review, new students to interview, programs to expand. The story that had started with humiliation in this building had transformed into something beautiful. And that, she thought, was the real ending. Not revenge or punishment, but growth. Not hatred, but healing. Not destruction, but building something better from the broken pieces. The white dress hung in her closet at home, waiting for the wedding next month. Another white dress, another full circle moment. But this time, she would wear it surrounded by people who saw her, who valued her, who understood that she had always been worthy. The stage wasn't set for confrontation anymore. It was set for celebration. And Amira Cole was finally fully free. When someone tries to strip away your dignity in front of the world, do you let their cruelty define your story, or do you rise and rewrite the ending yourself? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful tales of resilience, redemption, and the quiet strength that changes everything.